Old School Bodybuilding Clothing Company. If it's been 3.5 hours since you last ate protein, and now you're starting to freak out, you are old school. If watching someone sit on a hammer machine for 5 minutes between sets playing with their phone pisses you off, you are definitely old school. OSBBC.com for the hardest training athletes.
Welcome back, guys, to Guru Talk, and I'm here today with John Hansen, and we're going to be talking natural bodybuilding. Can you believe it, John? A show that doesn't talk about drugs. I can't believe it.
Right. Talking about how to not use drugs.
Right. Well, you know, if you don't have the basis of proper nutrition, okay, training, supplementation, if you don't have that part of the equation down pat, you're not going to maximize what you do when you take anabolics if you decide to go that route. So the show is a dual purpose. It's not just for natural bodybuilders. This show and how to get big. It's for everyone, because if you know, that's something that I really felt that was part of my success at putting on so much size, was that I had my diet and supplementation and training down so perfectly before I ever took my first pill of any kind of anabolic steroid, that when I did, I think I got a much better response than most people did.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think we've seen a lot of other bodybuilders who were natural for a long time, and when they went on the drugs, then they really went up to the top levels, like Kai Green and Ronnie Coleman. And
Jose Raymond, Sean Clarita,
Yeah. Sean used to be a natural bodybuilder. He used to compete in natural bodybuilding shows.
Sean Roden, he said that,
Yep. And what I've seen, Dave, I've been around the sport for over 40 years, and I remember when I started, they very rarely talked about steroids in the magazines. Once in a while, you would see an article where someone like Pete Grimkowski would come out and tell all, but most times everybody kept it hush-hush, or they just really downplayed it. Like they said they would only use them for 3 months before a contest and something like that. And nowadays it's totally opposite, where because we have the internet, we have YouTube, everybody talks about it. They talk openly about it. And I think what that's done is it's shown a lot of younger guys that you have to use steroids to get big. I don't think some of these guys believe you can build any kind of physique without using steroids, which is ridiculous.
From day one, they think they can't. Yeah. I remember reading an article in Flex magazine. It had to be in the very early 90s, maybe 1991. It was about growth hormone and how dangerous it was. Because they wouldn't do articles telling you how to use stuff, but they would do these articles explaining why you shouldn't use them. I was so horrified that I thought it was like the worst thing of all time, because I thought you're going to get type 1, you're going to get type 2 diabetes from it, you're going to get acromegalia, you're going to get every possible conceivable side effect that you would get from someone who has legitimate a pituitary tumor where they're over secreting GH their entire life. That's what they put every side effect in there that you would get from that, which is really not realistic. But nowadays, like you said, now it's the opposite. Now guys are like, if you don't take GH, you're a chump, that kind of thing. And if you're not using 10 IUs of it a day, you're even bigger chump. So it just I think that the education curve is just not there. But what I found, and I tell people this even to this day, and no one knows, everyone knows, I'm not by any means conservative about using anabolics. What I am a stickler for is proper nutrition and supplementation, because the food is what builds the muscle, let's face it, right? And the supplementation is what runs all the chemical reactions in the body. People don't realize that vitamins, minerals, metals, trace metals, they all are the cofactors in the chemical reaction. So if you're missing those, or you don't have enough of them, you can be limiting your muscle growth and or your fat burning too. So that's why it's super important. Now you've been an advocate of natural bodybuilding, a better part of your career, and I'll give my insights obviously, but what do you feel was the most successful you were, in terms of diet and supplementation routine during your career?
Well, I had this growth spurt when I was. I started bodybuilding when I was 14. I was 135 pounds and I was very skinny, and I had a really fast metabolism. It was hard for me to gain weight. It was hard for me to get big. I made a mistake when I was 16. I started competing in teenage shows,
Right.
and I got hooked on it. And
Yeah.
for the next 3 years, from 16 to 19, I did 10 shows.
Oh my God.
So I was doing like 3 or 4 shows a year. So I really didn't give myself a chance to get bigger. Although I did get a little bit bigger, I really wasn't focusing on size, which is what I should have did, especially as a teenage bodybuilder.
Right, but it's weird when you're young. You could gain muscle when you're young, even though you're dieting. You can't do that when you're older, but when you're young, somehow you put muscle on while dieting. I don't know.
Right. I think I was probably 180 in the off season, probably 170 for contests.
Wow.
My metabolism was so fast, I would get ripped in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, I would only have to diet for 4 weeks, and I'd probably be about 170. So when I turned 20 and I could no longer compete in the teenage shows, I said, I'm taking at least a year or two off, and I'm going to get as big as I can naturally.
Right.
So I got up to 205 the first year when I was 20.
Wow.
By the time I was 21, I was up to 230. So I had gained almost 100 pounds from when I started without taking any drugs.
Yeah.
And it was hard to do. I had to really eat a lot of food because my metabolism was so fast. I think at one point I was eating probably 5,000 calories a day. I was force feeding myself. A lot of big protein drinks and things like that.
Yeah.
And I was training 4 days a week. But that, I'll tell you, that totally changed my physique. You know, my physique looked totally different.
Yeah.
I had really expanded all the muscles as big as they could. And I also changed my metabolism. After that, my metabolism wasn't as fast, and I never had to go through that kind of bulking up period as much. Every time in the off season when I bulked up, it was much easier for me to gain weight. So I had completely changed my body, but it took 7 years. It took 7 years of training.
I found when I hit about 26, my metabolism slowed down a little bit, enough for me to start gaining muscle. And someone, I forget who told me that. They said, when you hit about 25, 26, you'll see your metabolism will level off a little bit and you'll be able to gain some more weight. And they were right. My best years was probably from 24 to 28, or 29. That's when I made my best gains. I couldn't, like you said, I couldn't really gain that much early on. But you know what? I started working out in high school. And then I kind of stopped and went the other direction in college because I wanted to be a fast runner. I wanted to run better, so I lost weight. And so then I did what you did. So I went down to 140, and then I did an about face. And I wanted to try to start gaining after college. I was in my last year of college, and I put on, like you said, I put on about 80 pounds naturally. Who knows how much of that was really just fluid and stuff like that, and proper hydration. But I noticed that the more protein I ate, the bigger I got. It was almost like a curve. As much protein as I can consume, that increased my rate at which I grew. And that's, I think, because younger guys in their early teens are not used to eating tremendous amounts of protein multiple times a day. So for me, the regimentation of the 6 meals, whether they be shakes or meals per day, is I found that's where the magic happens with me.
Yeah.
Just religiously getting on that schedule of eating.
Yeah. How many calories were you eating back then? Do you remember?
I never calculated, but it was literally like you could almost make a graph. Increase protein, increase muscle mass. It was crazy. And then I found at one point I kind of hit a plateau. This is when I was still natural. And then by adding a little bit of, dietary fat to my diet, because I remember reading Lee Haney, saying he eats like 1 or 2 egg yolks with his breakfast, right? Because everyone ate egg whites, right, back then. And then Haney was I ate 2 egg yolks, which seemed, today that's tame, but it seemed like almost like sacrilegious. And I said, well, I'm going to try that too. And this is before I even knew anything about, fats, just by putting a little bit of dietary fat in my diet, because everyone ate 0 fat basically back then. I started growing again. I hit another little growth spurt. I went from about 180 to about 205. I got up to about 215 naturally. I couldn't go beyond that though.
Well, it's funny you mentioned set points or plateaus, because I did the same thing. When I did my last teenage show, I was probably, like I said, about 170, 175 pounds. Within 6 months, my weight went up to 205 without even trying.
Wow.
Because I think my body was like, oh, finally, he's giving us a break. We can take in these calories, we can grow. And I got to over 200 pounds for the first time in my life.
Wow. And
I was like, cool, I'm on my way. I'm going to be 230 in no time. I hit a sticking point, and I couldn't gain a pound for 8 months. I was stuck at 205, and I just couldn't gain any weight. So that's when I bought the Nutrition Almanac book. This is before we had computers and before people weren't really tracking things as much back then, I don't think. So I bought the Nutrition Almanac book. I started writing down, I got the calories of all the foods I was eating, and I figured out exactly how many calories I was eating, and I really increased it a lot.
Yeah.
And that's when I bulked up and went up to 230. And that was over a 6-month period where I went from like 205 to 230.
Wow.
So I forced my body to get bigger. It didn't just happen easily. It took a lot of work.
Well, I'll tell you, and I like to give credit where credit's due. Even though it probably wasn't the best quality shake, Joe Weider had that Mega Mass 2000. You remember when he came out with that? It was 2,000 calories, but you had to like do, literally the scoop was not a scoop, it was a cup. It was a measuring cup. And I think you had to do 2 full measuring cups were like 2,000 calories, something like that. I mean, it was an enormous amount of powder. And I didn't want to guzzle the stuff down because it was almost like unbearable. So what I did is I used to make them I would mix them with oatmeal and raisins and some eggs. And I would make them into and I'd actually bake cookies with them. So I would take like the 2 scoops, the 2,000 calories. I think like 50 or 60 grams of that was like protein. And then I'm adding some whole eggs in there, obviously. And the oatmeal, which is adding more carbs, and I'm making cookies. And what I would do, this was when I was in medical school, I would have a plate, like it would be like piled this high, and I would literally put it right next to me, and I would just study, because in med school I had to study for like 2 to 4 hours every night, at least, depending on what I had to learn, and I would just sit there and eat these things nonstop. So I was constantly like slowly, putting protein and carbs and a little bit of fat into my body. Nonstop, and it tasted good, so it was like easy to do. And for some reason, when I study, and you guys might want to try this if you guys are readers or you watch TV, and because sometimes I fall asleep real easy when I start reading stuff. But if I'm eating something constantly, I can stay focused on what I'm doing, and I don't know why that is. Even to this day, if I'm sitting munching on something, I can keep myself really focused without having to do caffeine, because think about it, I did my studying at night. You can't sit there and drink cups of coffee, and then expect to go to sleep after. So that was my stimulant, so to speak. But you know what? When I did that, I would knock the whole plate of cookies off before going to bed, over the course of maybe 4 or 5 hours. And man, I woke up, I would swear I was bigger the next day.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the fats, because I think a lot of bodybuilders always focus on protein and carbs.
Yeah.
But when I was stuck at that 205 and I couldn't gain a pound, I looked, obviously fats have twice as many calories per gram as protein and carbs do.
Yeah.
So I increased a lot of my fats. I was eating a 7-egg omelet in the morning with just whole eggs, not egg whites.
That's what you got to do.
Monster cheese in it. And then I would have 2 protein drinks a day with whole milk, eggs, bananas, protein powder, and I would have 2 of those a day. That would be the whole blender, and I don't know how many calories that was. And then I would have Haagen-Dazs ice cream as a snack every day, like
we used
those little cups of Haagen-Dazs ice cream.
I had a friend whose dad worked in the restaurant business, and he used to supply the restaurants with chicken cordon bleu, and so he'd have all these stuff loaded in his freezer with these big. They used to, I guess, provide Friendly's ice cream to them, and they'd have these big half gallons. And we would go, he was a pretty jacked guy. He had really good genetics, and we would go into his freezer. He'd be like, "All right, we got to do protein," and we would scoop out, basically, like a quart of ice cream each, and we'd be eating that with, blending it up with protein shakes and stuff like that. And we thought we were getting huge from that. And we probably were. At that age, you can burn everything. You know what I mean? So it was crazy.
It's just amazing when your metabolism's going that fast, and this won't happen any other time in your life. I mean, after you get out of your early 20s, it's over.
No.
But your metabolism is going so fast, you really got to force the food in. And then, of course, the training has to be there, because that's what's going to stimulate the muscle in the first place. And when I look around the gym today, and I don't know if these younger guys that I'm looking at are trying to be bodybuilders or not, but they are training completely wrong. They're doing too many sets. They're using way too light of weight. They're not doing the compound movements. All the things you should be doing, they're doing the opposite. And I don't know where they're getting their information from, YouTube or whatever, but they're just training wrong. You have to really, really push yourself to train heavy and using the compound movements at that age, because that's what's going to stimulate the muscle. And then the food, of course, is what's going to complete the process of building your body.
That's a good point. And I'll tell you, relevant to myself, when I was training, I was doing the basic movements, but I was doing way too many sets. because what I would do is
Yeah.
if I wanted to improve my back, I would do every back exercise that there was. I'd write them all down. I had, bent rows, one arm rows, seated cable rows, pull downs from the back to the front, pull-ups. I probably did, 8 or 9 different back exercises at 3 to 4 sets per exercise, because that's what I thought you needed to do. You wanted a better back, you did more stuff, because that was my runner's mentality. And I wonder, I think at some point, like when I was about 215 or 218, I said I'm going to start taking a little bit of gear, and that's when I did my first like Winstrol and Primabone cycle. And I wonder if I would have fixed my training, if I would have, how much more I would have gained naturally. I always wondered that. That was my one, maybe people always ask me your one regret. That probably was my one regret, that I wasn't training properly, because I didn't have that tweaked out yet,
Yeah.
I'm surprised you only trained 4 days a week. That's pretty mature for, most guys would never, everyone was like a 6-day-a-week trainer back then, right? Because of Haney.
Yeah, well, I was training 6 days a week when I was a teenager, and I was doing all those teenage shows. And then when I switched over and I wanted to bulk up, that's when I said I'm going to cut back. But I was still training each muscle group twice a week.
Oof.
So I was doing this insane training program.
Oh my God.
Chest, shoulders, triceps, and calves on Monday, Thursday, and then abs, legs, back, biceps, and forearms on Tuesday, Friday. I mean, I was in the gym for at least 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But I did cut back on my sets. I was using like a moderate amount of sets. And I remember I counted up how many sets I was doing for the whole workout.
Yeah.
And I would stick to that plan so I wouldn't overtrain. But I mean, I was young too. I mean, that's why I could train that heavy, using 6 to 8 reps on all the compound movements, and training, or each body part twice a week. You can't do that when you start to get older.
No, and then if when you start doing workouts like that, if you're not drinking something like a carb drink or something like that, you're never going to get through the workout either. I mean, because you're definitely running out of stuff, You're definitely, because I would do these crazy long workouts too, but I had that like runner's mentality that, you're supposed to be suffering and you're supposed to feel depleted and exhausted, but that's really not the case with bodybuilding. That's a big mistake people make. You shouldn't leave the gym feeling like you just ran 10 miles, okay?
Yeah.
You should leave like feeling still pretty good. And I had to get used to that. I never really understood that concept. I learned that much, much later, though. I was definitely a chronic, because I trained with chronic overtrainers too. These guys would, the workout would be over and they're still running around doing extra sets, and then I think I'm missing out, so I better go do them too.
Yeah.
It was a big conception. So if we had to summarize, not overtraining, heavy compound movements, enough protein, enough carbs, and obviously not eliminating all the fats. Recovery, we really haven't talked about that, but make sure you sleep a lot. I was trying to sleep, as many hours as possible. Taking days off from the gym. These are all, until you have all this stuff tweaked out, and we haven't even got the supplements yet, you're not going to maximize your natural gains. I think that a lot of people give up training naturally, and they don't even have all their stuff maximized yet. They don't even have the basics down.
Well, I thought you made a great point I think it was last week, Dave, you did a Muscle in the Morning or something or Ask Dave, where you're talking about how you should train heavy and not just go for the pump. And you don't feel as good when you leave the gym, but that's what's going to stimulate the muscle.
Yeah.
When you start training heavy, I always stuck with 6 to 8 reps. So once I got this weight where I could do 8 reps, I would increase the weight on the bar, make sure, and then go back down. And then sometimes I would even do stuff where I was doing like 3 reps on my own, and my partner would help me with 2 or 3 forced reps, just to force my body to get stronger. Because I always believe the stronger you are in the basic compound movements for 6 to 8 reps, that's how, you're going to be bigger. If you look at Kevin Levrone, you look at Ronnie, you look at Jay Cutler, you go back to Arnold, Franco, Sergio, all those guys were super strong. Even go back farther to Reg Park, Bill Pearl, those guys were all really, really strong for that 6 to 8 reps with the compound movements. So that's the formula. That's the formula. That's what makes you big.
Yeah.
And to believe that you're just going to get this pump and you're going to build up that sarcoplasm and all that, no way, man. You got to build up those muscle fibers, and that's 6 to 8 reps with heavy weights, compound movements.
I remember when my friend Doug Wentz took me into the gym. I started training with him in, I think it was 92 or 93, right around there. And I thought I knew how to train. And we go in there, and I think benching like 185. Maybe I would do 225 for like 2 reps. And he's like, all right, 135. Now let's put 225. But I'm like, I do this for 2 reps. He's like, come on. He goes, look how big you are. At that point, I was starting to put some size on. So he was pushing me through those first couple workouts. It was scary. And then he'd be like, all right, we're going to 265. I'm like, I never even did 265. He's like, you're doing it today. And so he pushed me out of my comfort zone. I fell into a comfort zone of doing a lot of higher a lot of higher volume training, and not really lifting that heavy push because I didn't want to be out of that comfort zone. And he pushed me out of the comfort zone. And man, it was like he tortured me every single time I trained with him because he was so much stronger than me when we first started out. And I was doing things that I didn't like to do, and that's what you got to do. You can't be doing the comfort stuff every day. Like I train now comfortable because I'm not trying to compete anymore. I do what I like, the exercise I like, where I get a nice squeeze on it. I don't have to put myself in an uncomfortable zone because I'm not trying to make any improvements. I'm trying to just stay fit. And so it's a different mentality. If you want to get better, you have to go where you've never gone before.
Right. Well, you make another great point there, Dave, about pushing yourself. And you really need somebody to push yourself to that level.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to push yourself and train really, really hard by yourself.
Yeah.
But when you have somebody that's more advanced than you and pushes you and goes through that pain barrier, that's something that has to be taught. It's very hard because I think your mind is always trying to protect your body from pain.
Of course.
So if you push yourself like that, your mind's telling you stop. But when you have somebody screaming at you to do more reps and do more weight, then that's what's going to push you. And then once you pass that pain barrier, once you learn how to do that, then you can do it forever for the rest of your life. Every time you train, you can flip that switch and you can do it.
I remember I was training with Doug and for like a whole year, and I think maybe we were 6 months into our training together. And I was getting pretty big. I'd put on a lot of size. I was like maybe 250, 260. And at this point, I was strong. I got very strong. And he said, one day we go into the gym, he's like, yeah, we're going to do power cleans today. I'm like, what the fuck's power cleans? I'm like, I don't want to do these. And it was the most awkward movement because I'd never done them before. I don't even know where he came up with this, but he would always come up with something that I had never done before. And at this point, I'm getting such good results. I'm like, all right. He's like, don't complain, just do them. And I did it, man. I was sore the next day like crazy. And you know what? That's what I need. I needed someone like that to keep putting me into the zone of tricking my body, doing, even though it probably wasn't a great exercise because it's very ballistic and everything like that. It was something different than we had done, and it shocked my body a little bit. And that's what I learned. You have to constantly keep your body, guessing. Yeah, you got to squat almost every week because that's going to build legs, obviously. But some weeks you might skip it and do something a little different, maybe a Smith machine squat or something that's just going to kind of throw your body off kilter because maybe we went too many weeks in a row lifting super heavy, so he wanted to like kind of just change it up a little bit. And that's important if you want to if you hit plateaus or you want to keep making gains, mix it up. That's why when people ask me, what do you think of this routine? What do you think of that routine? I said, they're all great. Find what works for you, but then if you want, incorporate other stuff in there just to kind of keep your body guessing. And otherwise, you're going to hit stagnation points. And sometimes people think, oh, I'm stagnating, I got to take drugs now. No, you're stagnating because, number one, maybe you're not eating enough food now because you gained 20 pounds and you need more food. Or maybe your training is the same every week and you got to change that up a little bit. Maybe you need a new training partner or just to give you new ideas and stuff like that. Yeah. There's so many variables that you need to manipulate before you say, that's it, I can't make any more progress.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I always stuck with the barbells and dumbbells. I always tried to. I very rarely did machines. I mean, you probably heard Mel talking when me and Mel used to train. He used to be like, "Aren't we ever going to do like cable stuff?" I'm like, "No, barbell rows, T-bar rows, dumbbell rows, deadlifts. I think that's the basics. Right. That's what builds the muscle. Without drugs."
Yeah, when I first started doing like free weights, man, it was like I entered a new world. You remember the first time you tried a barbell bench press? The bar's like all over the place, and you can't even worry about pushing the bar up. You couldn't even balance the bar. Or dumbbells. The first time I got dumbbells up, they were like all over. I almost fell off the bench from them. So that's the reason why those are good, is because the stabilization aspect of that movement, free weight movement, you having to stabilize, involves more muscle groups, which gives you a completer development, which a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and now, I mean, we haven't even talked supplements, but I can't tell you, when you start increasing what you're doing in the gym, and you're trying to make your body engage in more protein synthesis reactions, oxidize more fat, the nutrients that normally are enough for your body that you might just get normally from your food now become scarce, and you start running out of stuff. You may not have enough B vitamins to metabolize carbohydrates. You might not have enough of the like chromium, which is a very common trace metal that's necessary for insulin to work properly. So if you're chromium deficient, you might not burn fat adequately. I'm just giving you examples, but there's a lot of different, calcium for muscle contraction, magnesium for muscle relaxation. All these different things come into effect. So now you have to increase your consumption of minerals, vitamins, and then we learn later, obviously, essential fatty acids, right, for repairing muscle cell membranes. Right. No one got it. A lot of people don't take enough of that stuff, or they take cheap forms of it that they're not absorbing, because just because you're swallowing a pill doesn't mean it's going into your bloodstream.
Right.
And that was a completely different science and different beast that I had to learn to conquer, and that's what really interested me. I was in medical school. I wanted to know. I'm learning all this stuff in what am I talking about? Biochemistry, about how all these vitamins and minerals are used as cofactors in all these chemical reactions. And I'm like, I'm not even taking this stuff. I said, how am I expected to maximize my performance? So when I started taking good quality supplements, I think you remember, what was it? I don't know if they're still around. Is Solgar still around? I guess they are, right?
Solgar? I don't know.
Solgar used to be like the number one. It was the most expensive. Remember, it came in a glass bottle with shrink wrap plastic, and I think they're still around, Solgar. I think Nature's Bounty owns them now or something like that. That was like the high-end line. I remember those products were really expensive. Also, you remember they had those aminos? What were those? It was like an Asian name. What were they called? Those aminos. They were just plain. They weren't flavored or anything. I can't remember what they were called. Someone's going to remind me in the comments. But you had to spend money, right? And people didn't. We didn't have money as kids. But that was an important. I mean, think about if you knew now about nutrition. I mean, if you knew then about nutrition what you know now in terms of supplementation, think about the progress you would have made.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even just counting up the calories and all that stuff. That's something I learned later on.
Yeah.
When I was trying to.
Right, but what were you taking? Were you taking an animal pack or an anabolic mega pack from Joe Weider? I mean, that's what most people took, right?
Well, when I was a kid, we were all taking liver supplements, those liver tabs.
Oh, the liver tabs, yeah. And I don't even know how.
30 a day. I was taking 10, 10, and 10.
It's because Vince Garanda told you to take them. That's why, right?
Yeah. We were taking those and amino acid supplements, and then of course the weight gain powder came in. When I was trying to gain weight.
Right, but I'm talking like pure, like multivitamin, mineral, type stuff. I remember Joe Weider came out with his Victory line of products, which was all they were very overpriced, but it was all marketing with Haney and Gaspari and Barry DeMay they were using. Those were, matter of fact, those were so high end that I think they wound up discontinuing them because they were so expensive to make. He had essential fats in there. This was before anyone ever did it. There was like a mega pack, but it was like he had his anabolic mega packs, but then these were like the next level. Like they were like, I remember I bought them a couple of times. They were very expensive, but there were essential fatty acids in there. There were like chelated minerals, because Joe was a big believer in chelate. He knew about chelated minerals bound to amino acids back then. Because remember, he was selling chromium polynicotinate, which is a chelated chromium, whereas a lot of people were selling the salt version of the chromium, which really wasn't absorbable. That made a huge difference in people's response to a lot of things. And I don't think people knew a lot about it. They just figured I have to take this stuff. But it's so important when you're training at that level and you're consuming that much food to take the right supplementation.
Yeah, I remember I'd be taking multivitamin, multimineral, vitamin C, B complex, vitamin E. Those are just the basics that you take every. You
could have 40 bottles on your kitchen counter, right? I mean, and you still had stuff you wanted to take. That's why when I produced the Species line of products, when I came up with V Mineralize and Omega Lize, I said, you know what? No one's going to take 16 different bottles. I got to put it all into two formulas: fats and minerals and vitamins, trace metals. Right. And I made it easy, and I put it in a month's supply because I remember the toil that I went through as a young bodybuilder, trying to get the right amount and how long is it going to last me, because I got to budget my money. I need 14 different bottles, and you start saying, well, all right, well, what can I afford and what can't I afford? If it was, so that's why I think that people love the animal packs and the anabolic mega packs, because it was like all in one formula.
All in one, right, exactly.
The problem was a lot of that stuff was never absorbed. They weren't good forms of the stuff. It wasn't really absorbable. Yeah, it was on the ingredient list, but I think someone did an experiment with those, because those animal packs used to have like those hard tablets, you remember?
Yeah.
Someone put them in water, like 20 days later, they still hadn't dissolved or something like that. So people were taking them and just pooping them out. They were coming out in the toilet bowl.
I believe it.
But it wasn't even. I can't even blame the companies. No one knew. It was such a early science back then. No one really knew what was really good. Bill Phillips was one of the first few people to really start letting people start to think about, hey, I need this supplement for this or this supplement for that, and this is a better form of it. And I think that's when Weider stepped his game up too, when Bill Phillips did.
Yeah, absolutely.
I call the mid 90s, or that early 90s, mid 90s, that was like kind of the heyday of supplementation, when finally people were starting to talk about quality of supplements, right? Because before that, everyone was using basically powdered skim milk and sugar. That's what all the protein powders were.
Yeah.
And then Metrex came out, and then Metabolol from Champion Nutrition. Those changed, and then Designer Protein. Those changed the way we thought about nutrition and supplementation.
And then creatine came along right around that time.
Yeah. And then all the other stuff. Dimetadrine for pre-training. Ultimate Orange, which was Duchesne's pre-workout. That was really the first. People don't realize that was the first pre-workout of all time.
Yeah.
Was the Ultimate Orange. It was ephedra and like a carbohydrate mix.
That was the other one, the ephedra, right?
Yeah.
That was the other big breakthrough.
Think about that. People think that BSN came out with NO Explode, which was the first pre-workout. It really wasn't. It was really Dan Duchesne. I don't know if whoever put out the Ultimate Orange. I know it was Dan's formula supposedly, right?
Yeah.
So notice we've been talking for 45 minutes maybe, and we haven't mentioned drugs one time, because
right, exactly.
Think about how much there is to think about before you even get to drugs. Yet most people, the first thing on their mind is what stack am I going to take, right?
Yeah, I really think it's the mindset nowadays where people just believe you have to take steroids to get big, and you really got to push yourself. I was the kind of guy that. I wasn't genetically gifted as far as like a fast gainer. I wasn't someone like Eddie Run or Sean Ray.
Yeah.
Those guys grew really easy as teenagers. I was very skinny. I had to transform my body, and I did it, but it took 7 years of training, and it also took a lot of eating and a lot of hard training. There was many, many years of really busting your ass in the gym. So the other thing I wanted to mention, Dave, also is these guys need to track their progress. Maybe take pictures once a month and take measurements once a month and make sure they're growing. And don't be afraid to get a little fat. You should, at that age, you're not going to get grossly fat unless you have a terrible metabolism. But if you're eating clean food, I remember even when I was bulking up, I would eat food that I prepared at home. I very rarely went out and ate. So it was all food and it was a lot of work eating all that food. Mm-hmm. But as long as I was getting bigger everywhere else, I didn't care if my waist went up a little bit. I was just happy to be gaining weight at that point. I was happy to be getting as big as I could be.
Well, it's also about, it's consistently applying all the principles we just talked about: training properly, resting, eating the right amount of foods, never missing a meal, taking all your nutritional supplements. A lot of people are not OCD enough to apply that every single day, 7 days a week. Every day of the month, every day of the year. People go in spurts. They're good for 4 to 6 weeks, and they kind of get lazy. They go away. They go out with their friends. They drink. They miss a couple meals. Before they know it, the 6 weeks of progress they made, they just went and they lost it all. And that I was of the mindset, and it seems like you were too, that we had this goal of how we wanted to look, and we weren't going to miss ever anything. You never were going to miss a meal. You're never going to miss a workout. Right. You were not going to leave anything to chance. Anything we had control of, any variable, we made sure that we maximized. And that's how you make good gains. Because it's not the gains you make 3 days a week. It's the small incremental progress you're doing every single day, and it all adds up.
And you mentioned the rest and recuperation. I remember during that time, I was sleeping 8 hours a night, and probably taking an hour nap during the day. And I cut back on all my outside activities. The only thing I did was weight training. I wasn't playing around, shooting basketball or running around or doing anything else. All I was doing was I cut back. And I remember there was a saying, don't run if you can walk, don't walk if you can stand, don't stand if you can sit down. If you're going to sit down, you might as well take a nap.
No, and I was a big believer of that too. It's funny, my father always told me too, he goes, if you want to be an athlete, play your sport. Don't play other sports because you're going to wind up getting hurt. And I took that to heart. I stopped doing, like you said, all any other risky behavior, that I would normally do. Other stuff, pick up basketball. Back then the big thing was, coming out of high school or in high school is football, the pickup football games, right? You play we used to play tackle football with no equipment. It was crazy what we did, but it was fun, and I loved it. But you know what? That's when you're bodybuilding and you're building your body in one plane of motion, and then you go play football on a weekend, for one day, you wind up crippling yourself. I wouldn't play beach volleyball and stuff like that because you go up to spike the ball, and before you know it, you tear a bicep or you pull your shoulder out.
And just conserving calories. I remember when I was like 15 years old and I was in high school. This is before I started competing. I tried out for wrestling just to, try it. I never had done wrestling before. And these guys are running around and they're burning all these calories, and then they're trying to cut weight. I'm like, this is the exact opposite of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get bigger. These guys are trying to lose weight and get more ripped and get smaller,
Yeah. It's weird because I was a runner, and then I had to like wean myself off running because I was so addicted to it. And then I got to a point where I got so big I couldn't even run anymore. It was like my body. I completely changed how functional my body was from one thing to another. It's incredible how you can do that to your body. But if you want to be good at what you're good at, do what do what you want to be good at. Don't do what you don't want to be good at. And I always tell that to people. When you're training and let's say you're trying to burn some body fat, it's stupid to go and do super crazy high intensity cardio when you don't have to perform cardiovascularly on stage for that. It's not like you're training for a triathlon where you actually have to run a race. You're doing cardio so that you can burn fat and look good on stage. It has nothing to do with functionality. And I think a lot of people, start thinking, well, if I do high intensity, crazy, nutty cardio, I'm going to burn more calories.
Yeah.
But that's not going to be functional for bodybuilding. You're going to also burn a lot of muscle doing that,
Yeah, this whole concept is more is better. I hear people talking about it all the time. Like they'll do a contest and they're like, I got to bring up my back, so I'm going to start training my back 3 days a week.
Well, how about every day? The Rich Piana feeder workouts he used to do, which was, I think, more of Rich would kind of think up things that would shock people and would do these videos. I'm like, you don't train a weak body part every day. You train it less, not more.
Right, exactly. And
make the workouts count.
And I see so many guys today training 6 days in a row, and you got to rest. You got to hit it hard in the gym and then recuperate. You got to rest. Back then, I was training 4 days a week. Maybe I could have made better gains back then, going 3 on, 1 off. But you always got to have those rest days.
Right. I remember when Ronnie Coleman was Mr. Olympia, and people would see that he's doing each body part twice a week. He's training 6 days a week, like you said.
Right.
And people are trying to emulate that. I'm like, guys, this guy is a genetic freak. He can recover from anything that he does.
Right.
Probably if he trained the right way, he would be, 330 pounds on stage. Don't try to do what he does. That's not the guy you should be copying,
Exactly, right.
I always thought Dorian was a good guy to copy because I just thought, even though Dorian structurally had obviously a genetically good structure for being a great bodybuilder, he didn't look like he was like a particularly genetically blessed guy in terms of gym. I think it was a lot of intellectual and scientific, study that he did to see what would work best, what routines. He wrote everything down. He was very methodical. That's a guy you can kind of copy to try to emulate because he wasn't a genetic freak like a Levroni or a Flex. Anything they did, they grew. He got to be the best because he was a scientist about it,
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Dorian came along in the 90s, and when I was growing up in the 70s, we had Mike Menser.
Yeah.
Because when I started working out, we all followed Arnold. Everybody was training 6 days a week. Everybody in the whole country was training 6 days a week. Arnold was.
Sure.
And then Menser came along and he goes, no, I only train 4 days a week, and you can train a muscle hard or you can train it long. You can't do both. And that blew everybody's mind. And I think that changed everybody's training. I don't think a lot of people went and did exactly what Menser did, but everybody cut back. I think everybody cut back from 6 days a week, 20, 25 sets of body part.
Right.
We all cut back, and I think everybody made more gains after that point.
Yeah, and there are guys who can do 25 sets and grow from it. Obviously, we've seen these guys, but not many people can do that.
Right.
I certainly couldn't recover from that. If anything, I got smaller from doing like 25 sets. I didn't even gain any muscle. I would get leaner, but I wouldn't get any bigger. Yeah. So.
Well, I remember Tom Platt said that too. He said when he went to California, he trained with Arnold, and he got smaller.
It's funny how Arnold really responded. I wonder if Arnold would have responded to like more of a Dorian and like training routine. I know Arnold liked to train for hours and hours, but he was a tall guy. I wonder if he would have had better legs had he not overtrained his legs and stuff like that. It would have been just interesting to see.
Well, if you look at Arnold back when he was in his 20s, though, he did a lot of powerlifting, and he was, much more bulkier.
Right.
When he came out of Europe.
That's true.
And then when he found a whole new way of training, I think, when he came to America.
Yeah, well, California, in general, different mentality there. Everyone's like, very laid back there and everything.
Yeah,
like that. That's why Arnold did so well there. I think he had that that Iron Curtain, Eastern European, work ethic, and then he goes to California where everyone's like, yo, peace, happiness, and just kind of like, chilling out. And so Arnold just ate those guys for lunch there,
Yeah, exactly.
The best bodybuilders in California were the guys who came from the East, right, and came across the country,
Right.
They weren't homegrown there, that's for sure.
Yeah, not many of them.
Anyway, well, I hope people, took some of this information that we put out there to heart and realized that, hey, if you want to be a natural bodybuilder, here's some great advice. But you know what? If you want to be a bodybuilder that uses gear at some point or uses it now, you still got to do the same things. That's why when people say, hey, Dave, do you train natural bodybuilders? I'm like, of course I do. It's the same exact formula, whether you're natural or not. Drugs just make things work better. That's all.
Yeah. I'm doing the same thing. I'm training natural bodybuilders and getting ready for shows, and it's a whole different mindset. But you got to put in that work, and you got to do it right. And if you train like a lot of these kids I see in the gym, you're never going to get anywhere. No.
Well, it is. I think people think drugs can make up, and to some degree, drugs can compensate for mistakes that you make. But imagine if you do everything right, how good the results will be. People say, Dave, how did you gain 100 pounds of muscle in 5 years? And I said, well, because I did everything right. I at that point I had got everything on my training, my diet, my supplementation, my drugs, my rest and recuperation, my lifestyle I set up for myself. Everything kind of worked, and that's the way you make the best gains. I mean, you can still make gains, but if you want to maximize your gains, that you got to have every variable covered. And and that's I teach that in my Secrets to Becoming a Diet Guru course. I know you talk about it all the time on your things. Ask Dave. I keep pounding the same advice into people's heads, because once they realize it, that there's no secret, there's no magic bullets out there, okay? Right. And I know a lot of gurus don't want to hear, they don't want us to tell anyone this. They want everyone to think that there's a special secret that they're only going to get by working with this coach or that coach. There's no secrets, guys. A good coach is someone who takes a program that has all the basic tenets covered and knows how to manipulate it and make the changes to keep your progress moving forward, whether it be gaining muscle or losing body fat. And that's what makes a good coach. There's no secret magic, formulas. I put all my diets and everything out there for free. I've been doing it for 30 years. I've been putting it out there. Here's my keto diet. Here's my supplement routine. Because that's not what's special. What's special is, you got to have the basics down, but then it's how you modify it, how you add the right foods at the right time, or reduce the amount of training you're doing, or add cardio, or whatever you're trying to do. That's a good coach, and that only comes with experience. I mean, John, you've been doing this a long time. I've been doing this a long time. You can't teach someone that. I could teach them the science, but coaching experience comes from just years of doing it.
Yeah, and you got to have the passion and the heart for it too. You got to train hard, and you got to eat good. And that's not going to, it's not what you do, it's how you do it.
Right.
You really got to push yourself both at the gym and at home when you're eating.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, you're not going to get the most amount of gains you can get.
Right. And if you're a coach, you can't, I'm not there with you in your house. So
Right.
I can't motivate you to want to be the best that you can be. But if you have that motivation and I coach you or John coaches you, you're going to get great results because we're going to make sure that all of those variables are covered. So
Absolutely.
anyway, on that note, let's wrap this up. I want to thank everyone for joining us for another episode of Guru Talk. If you guys have any suggestions for future shows, put them in the comments below and we will absolutely address them then. I'm Dave Palumbo with John Hansen. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Dave.